wide world of flying, we'll fly across the Atlantic in a Pumper Malibu with Bill Cox on his 38th crossing in a light airplane. For Bayer, we'll take you on a visit to one of the newest of the automated flight service stations to show you their inner workings. In a feature aimed at improving pilot proficiency, Captain Bill's shift demonstrates the right way and the wrong way to execute rejected takeoffs and landings. Bob Machado brings you important tips on propeller safety from the AFPA Air Safety Foundation. And finally, you'll get a unique view of the F4U Corsair from World War II right up to the present, including the fastest Corsair that has ever flown. In our bonus buyer's guide at the end of this tape, you'll learn about the medical certification services of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. John King will tell you about important changes in section charts. Martha King will explain new identification requirements for airplanes. And Northstar Avionics will show you some of the unique features of their advanced technology in the lab. All this and more in this issue of ABC, Wide World of Flying.
Welcome to the fourth video edition of ABC's Wide World of Flying. From flying across the Atlantic in a single-engine plane to a checkout in a Navy Corsair, we've got an issue packed with stories for those of you who love to fly. My commentary on this video deals with the little-known regulations that are affecting those of us who own and fly airplanes for personal transportation under Part 91 of the FARs. No, I haven't traded in my Beach Baron, but this Cessna 340 is a good illustration. Obviously, it's a twin-engine aircraft, and it contains two of almost everything. The instrument panel contains enough optional equipment to be the envy of any pilot. Now, under FAR 9130, this aircraft is not airworthy. In other words, it can't be flown if one of the two ADFs is inoperative, unless there's an approved MEL or minimum equipment list on file for this specific airplane. Now, we all know that it's a rare occasion when every little thing works on a complex airplane loaded with avionics. The catch-22 is that the FAA just isn't issuing MELs in a timely fashion to Part 91 pilots trying to comply. Now, you single-engine owners and renters shouldn't figure this doesn't affect you. The FAA General Counsel has interpreted other regulations such that inoperative equipment invalidates the airworthiness certificate of any aircraft, twin or single. As an example, AOPA cites a single-engine airplane that was grounded because a day VFR flight was about to be undertaken with a nav light out. Now, clearly, the processing and enforcement of these rules is much ado about nothing. The real issue isn't faster processing or simplifying Part 91 MELs. There's just no evidence that inoperative equipment or instruments identified by the pilot prior to takeoff has caused accidents. A new notice of proposed rulemaking that provides some relief has just closed its comment period. We don't feel that some relief is good enough when the rules are not needed at all. Writing to the FAA can still help. Just refer to the inoperative instruments or equipment rulemaking. Pressure on your local flight service district office will also assist in reinforcing the make-work nature of these rules in an already overworked system. The FAA would like to think rigid guidelines are necessary, when in reality, we pilots have a greater concern for our own safety. But now, let's get into our first feature story, and you can be sure that Bill Cox checked all his equipment carefully for a flight across the Atlantic in a single-engine plane.
You may recognize the airplane behind me from a few issues back. It's the Piper Malibu, the most sophisticated single-engine piston airplane in the world. Our story today, though, isn't on the Malibu itself. Under contract to Globe Aero of Lakeland, Florida, I'm here at Piper's Vero Beach plant to deliver this airplane across the North Atlantic, 5,000 nautical miles to Saarbrücken, West Germany. First, though, we need to fly this Malibu up to Globe's headquarters in Lakeland and have it fitted with an HF radio and Loran C for our ocean crossing. Come along with us now as we begin our 4-day delivery flight to West Germany. Certainly, if you plan to fly the ocean in a single-engine airplane, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better one than a Piper Malibu. Besides being the fastest, most expensive, and arguably most comfortable airplane on the market, its large 120-gallon fuel tanks give it excellent range, 1,500 nautical miles at economy cruise settings. Because this is a new engine, however, and low power settings aren't a good idea for the critical first 50 hours, we'll use max cruise to help seat the rings. We'll fly faster this way, 210 knots, and burn a little more fuel, 16 gallons per hour, but we'll still realize a range of nearly 1,200 nautical miles. Globe Aero in Lakeland, Florida is the largest company in the business of moving general aviation airplanes around the world, and Globe isn't picky about destinations. They delivered 4,000 airplanes, everything from Super Cubs to King Airs, to virtually every country in the free world. A Loran and HF radio are vital navigation and communication tools across the oceans, and here at Globe, most of the ferry airplanes are fitted with temporary antennas for the trip. Our Loran C on this trip is my RNAV R21 NMS that I've pre-programmed with all the waypoints we'll need between Lakeland and Saarbrücken. Loran will be our only precise radio navigation link over the ocean. While Brian's installing our Loran and HF for our ocean crossing, let's take a look at the survival equipment and some of the other items that it's a good idea to carry if you're going to cross the ocean. This is a 4 to 6 million life raft. You might think that's a little bit of overkill, if you pardon the expression, for one person. The only reason for that is that a 6 million life raft is considerably more stable in the water than is a 1 or 2 million life raft. Also, it's a whole lot more comfortable if you have to spend any amount of time in it. As far as life vests are concerned, we use 2 life vests simply for the redundancy factor, so that if one of them springs a leak, has a hole in it, we've still got one to keep us afloat. And we also have a hand compass, an engineer's hand compass. This could theoretically be used for setting a course if you're trying to direct a raft after a ditching. We have a manual ELT. The aircraft is also fitted with an ELT, which is G-activated by approximately a 6G jolt. Ditching an airplane in the ocean, however, might or might not produce a 6G bump. So the aircraft ELT may not be activated by a ditching. The main items that the survival now is right out in front. This is a Bailey immersion suit. It is theoretically good for just about any temperature water you'd care to put it in. In fact, one of the better-known ferry pilots, Peter Goldstern, was in the water for something like 19 hours just off of Reykjavik in 34-degree water about 4 years ago in December, and was picked up and was in good shape after having survived 19 hours in the water. Finally, we have something that you can't find in the North Atlantic. At least you can't find fresh in the North Atlantic, and that's water. There's salt water all around, but as you're probably aware, you can't use it. So we have 3 gallons of fresh water with us, and that's enough to keep one person going for at least a week. Our route of flight across the ocean without supplemental fuel tanks will take us from Lakeland, Florida, up the east coast to Bangor, Maine, then on over Quebec to Goose Bay, Labrador, across the Davis Strait to Narsarsuaq, Greenland, above the ice cap in the Denmark Strait to Reykjavik, Iceland, southeast toward Europe over the Norwegian Sea to Prestwick, Scotland, and finally across the North Sea and Belgium on into West Germany. Today's leg is an easy 1,250 nautical mile hop up to Bangor, Maine. After we've signed our contract, checked the necessary export paperwork to satisfy U.S. Customs and the FAA, and determined that all our emergency gear is in good shape, there's nothing left to do but fly. On this trip, we're flying without supplemental fuel, so we'll limit the longest leg to about 800 nautical miles, giving us at least a 400 nautical mile reserve. If that seems excessive, remember that there will be very few alternates where we're going. The first leg on any international delivery flight to Europe is nearly always the easiest. It's all inside the United States. There are plenty of VORs and non-directional beacons, so navigation is simple. And the East Coast is literally covered with airports in case we have a problem. We use the domestic flight north to Bangor to check out all systems and make certain the airplane is truly ready for the flight across the ocean. Here in the States, we have good access to avionics, engine, and airframe repair facilities. That won't be the case once we pass Labrador. Fortunately, the Malibu's 5.5 psi pressurization system allows us to fly high and fast with good efficiency. So our 1,200 nautical mile trip to Bangor today requires only about 5 hours. As you may be able to tell by the change of clothing, we've had a change of location and climate. We're now about 1,250 nautical miles up the road from Lakeland in Bangor, Maine. And instead of the 100-degree high humidity that we had yesterday down in Vero Beach in Lakeland, we now have about 50 degrees up here in lovely Bangor. Our mission today is going to be a fairly short one. We have only to fly from Bangor to Goose Bay, Labrador. And that's only about 630 nautical miles up the road. But before we do that, we need to clear customs. If you're exporting an airplane as we are, you'll need to clear customs outbound. If you're taking a trip in your own airplane and plan to return, there's no need to bother with customs in leaving the U.S. Perhaps in keeping with its important mission, Bangor's flight service station is one of the most modern there is. They offer practically every service you could ask for. The briefers are used to dealing with requests for weather information on Canadian destinations such as Goose, Gander, and St. John's, and they often can pull up weather for Greenland and Iceland as well. After leaving Bangor, we'll fly over Presque Isle to Sept Îles, Quebec, and on into Goose Bay in just about 3 hours even today.
Okay, we're off of Bangor on our way to Goose Bay this morning, and unfortunately, we're flying in a milk bottle here at 17,000 feet. This is somewhat predictably the weather that we might have anticipated this time of year. We have a haze layer that runs from about 2,000 feet above the ground to about 28,000 feet today, and we can't go quite that high in the Malibu. So we're going to truck on up to 17,000 to Goose Bay. We have the controller's promise that we're going to be seeing better weather on up the road when we pass Sept Îles, Quebec, and on into Goose Bay from there.
Nobody likes ice, least of all a pilot flying the ocean. Though the Malibu we're flying today is approved for flight into known icing conditions, any encounter with ice can present some special problems if the airplane is fitted with a temporary Loran antenna, as is this one. The wire will tend to accumulate ice and vibrate. If the rate of ice accumulation isn't too great, it will build only to a certain point and then the vibration will break it loose. In very bad conditions, however, it's possible to have the antenna get so heavy that it simply breaks, and that'll be the end of your Loran reception for that leg. True to the forecaster's promise, the atmospherics are improving dramatically as we begin our descent into Goose Bay. But really solid IFR with warm icing is improving to scattered conditions. It's nice to be out of IMC. The terrain there isn't so inviting in winter, but here in late summer, the tumbling lakes of northeast Canada are truly spectacular. As we approach Goose Bay, we should note that flying in the remote regions of Canada is very similar to flying in the States. One major difference is that flight plans are mandatory. Even if the weather is good VFR, an IFR flight plan provides a hedge against the unexpected. Though the radar map doesn't quite cover all the country up to Goose, it's reassuring to know that most of the time someone is watching over you as you traverse some of the wildest country on Earth. This is Goose Bay, Labrador, on the far upper right-hand corner of the North American continent. This is a popular jumping off spot for pilots going to Europe, especially those who must take the milk run route through Greenland and Iceland. From here, it's only about 650 miles on over to Narsarsuaq, and then about another 730 or 740 from there to Reykjavik, Iceland. The Canadian weather briefers have to be the best, and they are. Mm-hmm. Probably because they realize how critical good weather information is over the North Atlantic. Oceanic weather briefings here in Canada are a little different from those you receive in the States. You're given a full package of weather information, including wind charts for your selected altitude, significant weather notifications of what you're liable to encounter en route, and freezing levels, a very important point in the North Atlantic. Plus, you're given terminal forecasts and current conditions for both your destination and your alternate. In our case, on our flight from Goose Bay to Narsarsuaq, Greenland, we have a left crosswind indicated on the chart at 18,000 feet of just about 30 knots. As far as significant weather is concerned, we have very little to worry about, it appears. It appears to be almost nothing between Canada and Greenland, although we do have a freezing level at approximately 5,000 feet that runs directly over Narsarsuaq. Also, you'll notice the surface freezing level is only about 100 miles north of Narsarsuaq. Our weather for Bravo Golf Bravo Whiskey, the designator for Narsarsuaq, Greenland, currently they have fog with 3/8 stratus at 300 feet and 8/8 stratus at 500 feet. However, by the time we arrive in approximately 4 hours, they're anticipating there will be only about 2/8 stratocumulus at 5,000 feet and 5/8 altocumulus at 7,000. So the weather should be very good. Our ICAO flight plan form is also very different from its FAA equivalent. For one thing, we're required to give CUNE position estimate times for every fix along our route of flight, something that's not normally required on IFR flights in the States. We're not on radar, and we don't have radio navigation aids to report over, so we need to give them an idea of exactly where we are. Plus, they need to have a very good idea of what type of emergency equipment we have on board, with reference to rafts, life vests, that sort of thing. As you can also see, we're expecting to arrive at Bravo Golf Bravo Whiskey, our destination, in approximately 3 hours and 15 minutes. And our alternate on this flight is Bravo Golf Gulf Hotel, which has got to Greenland approximately 200 miles northwest of Narsarsuaq. On the chart, our trip over the Labrador Sea runs northeast out of Goose Bay to Semiatak Beacon and up the Skav Fjord on into Narsarsuaq. After a final check of our survival gear, we lift off of Goose Bay Airport and turn northeast toward Greenland. It's reassuring to know we have close to enough fuel to make Iceland if Greenland unexpectedly goes down. But since close only counts in horseshoes, we'd better get into Greenland. Only about 500 miles of the leg between Goose and Narsarsuaq is over water, but no matter how many times we fly the ocean, we always have a little apprehension when the last point of land passes under the wing and we leave Canada behind. Right now, if you look down below the aircraft, you can see a very typical cloud formation over the North Atlantic. And that is a very flat layer of clouds that stretches off practically the horizon. You get very little vertical development over the ocean, and the reason is that several of the lifting forces you normally encounter over land are just not there. Number one, there's no wave action because there's no mountains. And number two, there's no convection because there's no heat. As a result, the clouds tend to be extremely flat, and they just sometimes stretch from horizon to horizon. As far as you can see, totally flat. Today, there's quite a bit of ice down there. We were told by the briefer back in Goose Bay that the forecast was for icing conditions from 5 all the way up to 16,000 feet. And we're cruising at 17,000 feet for that very reason. So we don't anticipate any problems. The forecast for Narsarsuaq is good, and it looks as if when we get in there, we should have nothing worse than a scattered to broken clouds and visibility in excess of 15 miles. Halfway across is the loneliest spot, though our HF radio with its trailing wire antenna lets us maintain contact with Gander Center all the way. We've strung the antenna through a standpipe in the airplane's belly, and we let the wire out to tune the antenna with a kind of king-sized fishing reel. The German dealer will seal the hole before the airplane is handed over to the customer. When you spot your first iceberg, you realize just how cold that water down there really is. In winter, it can drop as much as 10 degrees below normal freezing because it's salt water and moving. Here in early September, it's probably up to a balmy 36 degrees or so. Navigating across the ocean is principally about dead reckoning with Lorraine Sea and ADF as backups. Between Goose Bay and Sassarak, we use Prince Christian Sound and Salutoc beacons on the ADF and the Labrador Sea Chain on Lorraine. The fjords of Greenland are always a welcome sight. In the fall, the ice pack has moved far north, unclogging the fjords and opening the waterways for the short Arctic fishing season. The town of Narsarak is about the only one you'll see on your approach to Narsarsuaq. The beautiful Stroud Fjord cuts 45 miles through the coastal mountains and is a standard approach for pilots. In fact, if the weather really goes down, as it often does at this latitude, especially in winter, the up-the-fjord approach is sometimes the only method of getting in. Goddard is the standard alternate, but too often when Narsarsuaq is down and out, so is Goddard, so you better get into Narsarsuaq. Narsarsuaq, Greenland, along with being one of the most spectacular stops you can make along the North Atlantic, is also one of the quietest places, I think, on the face of the Earth, when you don't have a bunch of airplanes flying around making noise. When we pulled up on the ramp here a few minutes ago, we were the only airplane on the entire airport. Since we arrived, they pulled out a Twin Otter and a helicopter that are basically going out on ice patrol to check the location of the ice pack off the coast. From here, tomorrow morning, it turns out we're going to be going on over to Reykjavik. If we were to depart right now, we'd be arriving in Reykjavik about 3 hours after dark with icing conditions and embedded thunderstorms. And most people wouldn't find that a lot of fun, me in particular. So tonight we're going to stay over here in Narsarsuaq at the fine little hotel right on the airport. And tomorrow we'll continue on over to Reykjavik and possibly on down to Prestwick, Scotland. We were lucky that Narsarsuaq was VFR today because the NDB DME approach is hardly worth considering in actual IFR conditions. Minimums are 1,800 feet and 6,000 meters or 4 miles. And the descent slope is a steep 5.6 degrees. That's compared to 3 degrees on a conventional approach. The sea level airport is completely surrounded by mountains, including a 6,000-foot peak off to the southeast. And there's a 4,600-foot peak practically right on the approach, only 15 miles from the runway. Many people aren't aware that most of Greenland isn't land. It's a ring of mountains that have filled with ice. At the deepest point, northeast of Sanderstrom Fjord, at 65 degrees north latitude, it's nearly 10,000 feet of solid ice, specifically 3,038 meters. On the hop over to Reykjavik today, we'll cross the southern edge of the Greenland ice cap, about 3,000 feet high at Narsarsuaq, going on over to Reykjavik. Narsarsuaq can be an interesting airport to get out of because of its resident fog problem. The fog often moves in over the area in a very short time, and that's exactly what happened on the morning of our departure. The fog formed over the glacier to the east of the airport and threatened to shut down operations as it moved west. Instrument departures are virtually non-existent at Narsarsuaq, so we hurried off the ground, turned short to avoid the clouds, and circled up above the fog to the west of the airport. The southern Greenland ice cap is certainly the most spectacular sight on the North Atlantic route, especially when you consider that you're only crossing the bottom tip of a huge frozen continent that runs nearly 1,500 miles toward the North Pole. In our case, we're crossing it at 195 knots true airspeed up at 19,000 feet, and the OAT tells us that we are indeed very far north, minus 35 degrees centigrade outside. As we fly across the Denmark Strait toward Iceland, you'll notice we're monitoring 121.5 in case we or someone else gets into trouble and needs help. Iceland is a welcome island of humanity on the ocean, though the weather is probably the most changeable you'll find. The city of Reykjavik is right in the sea, an unusually colorful town with its multi-colored roofs, a huge rock church that's been under construction for 60 years, free geothermal heating because of all the volcanic activity, and some of the friendliest people in the world. Most of the airlines go into the giant airbase at Keflavik, but we little guys can use the smaller Reykjavik airport that's practically right downtown. Because the winds are often strong and unpredictable, Reykjavik has runways in practically every direction, and with choice of an ILS, separate localizer, and 2 NUV approaches. As far as I'm concerned, Iceland has always been something of a victim of a bum rap. Perhaps it's because of the name Iceland that implies that it's some kind of a pretty horrible place. But interestingly enough, we just came over from Greenland, which is mostly ice. And here in Iceland, at least in the summer, it's mostly green. Here in the background, we have the first snow of the season, however. The weather is changing for the worse, we're told by the weather meteorologist here at the Reykjavik airport. As a result, we're going to fire back up and head straight on down to Prestwick. Our original plan had been to stop here at Reykjavik for the night because the Loftuda Hotel is a great stop. But unfortunately, the forecast is for frost and severe icing conditions, in-flight icing conditions tomorrow. So we're going to go ahead and head down to Prestwick on top of the stuff. We're going up 23,000 feet between here and Prestwick. And then tomorrow morning, we'll continue on over to Saarbrücken, Germany. From here to our revised destination of Glasgow is about 770 nautical miles. Virtually is questionable, but we plan to be on top most of the way down Scotland. Accurate fueling during ocean crossings is particularly important for obvious reasons. For example, we had an 8-gallon air bubble in the left tank, about a half hour's worth of fuel missing. If I hadn't shaken the wing to check for air, I would have taken off 8 gallons short. Though most pilots wouldn't run the reserves that tight anyway, considering the lack of alternates, you need to fly with all the fuel you can get. We leave Reykjavik behind reluctantly as it's a great little town. There's not always a lot to do other than admire the scenery and watch it snow. But we know there's a man in Saarbrücken, West Germany, eager to see his new Malibu, and the weather could trap us here in Reykjavik for several days.
Well, it's just past 23:50 Greenwich time here in Glasgow, Scotland. We arrived about an hour ago in what is certainly the worst weather we've had so far on the trip. Had to shoot an ILS approach to minimums about 401 in rain and icing conditions. British Isles are truly beautiful when you can see them, but too much of the time you just can't. And certainly today was no exception. Weather is often a factor in flight planning in this part of the world. If you can't go IFR, quite a bit of the time you just can't go at all. We're hoping for better weather on tomorrow's leg on over to Saarbrücken, and it certainly can't get much worse.
The final leg on our delivery flight covers just under 600 nautical miles across the North Sea. We'll overfly England's east coast, Belgium, and Luxembourg on our way to West Germany.
This morning, we're going to head over to Saarbrücken, and we're told we have considerably better weather. Not to mention that we have 50 knot tailwinds approximately, going to help push us on over to Saarbrücken. The weather in Saarbrücken is supposedly very good. They're saying it's pretty much clear. And we hope to be able to show you the coast of England and France as we go across and on into Germany to deliver this little Piper Malibu to its new owner. As I push the throttle up for the last leg of our trip, I'm a little sad that I actually have to deliver the airplane, especially considering that it's a $500,000 Malibu. On the other hand, I know there's a beach group that needs to go to Amman, Jordan, waiting for me back at Globe in Florida, and that should be an interesting trip as well. Malibu certainly has made our trip simple, though, flying in pressurized comfort high above the weather with ground speeds often touching 250 knots. I can't think of a nicer way to travel Europe on one engine. Okay, we've just crossed over the English coast at Newcastle, crossing the North Sea, going down to Dogger intersection. And I've got to say, today was something of a first. This is the first time I've ever received clearance as filed for a flight from England and into Northern Europe. Most of the time, there's so much military activity going on that you end up diverting around various types of military bombing rings and reconnaissance efforts and that sort of thing. But today we got those fired who were at 17,000 feet. We just had a day into a Dagger intersection and went on over across Brussels, Belgium, and into Saarbrücken, West Germany. Once again, the weather isn't quite up to the forecaster's promise of clear skies. As we begin to descend over Belgium and Germany, though, the clouds part and we can see one of Europe's nuclear power plants during our approach to Saarbrücken. It's been about 4 days and 5,000 miles since we left Lakeland, Florida, and we arrived at Saarbrücken, West Germany, after about 7 stops and a very uneventful flight. The weather wasn't as good as we planned, but all things considered, it was probably better than we should have expected for this time of year. From here, it's on up to Frankfurt, Germany, and then a 14-hour ride on plane and back to Los Angeles for Karen Vince Michael and myself. We're looking forward to the Pan Am flight really as much as we were to the trip across in Pepper's Malibu. But before we leave here in Saarbrücken, we're going to present the keys to the gentleman who bought this airplane, and I'm sure he's really eager to accept them. And here we have a gentleman there, Michael Vogel, and his girlfriend Bridget. And they are the happy new owners of this Malibu that we just brought all the way from Lakeland. Mr. Vogel, your keys. Thank you very much for the opportunity for your airplane.
Thank you. It's a very nice airplane.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. International flying is for everyone, especially when there's emotion involved. Flying the North Atlantic demands not only the inclination and the resources, but a willingness to live a little closer to the edge. Certainly the element of danger is minimal in today's reliable modern aircraft, but there's no question you're more at risk above the ocean than you are drifting along above the plains of Nebraska. In the last half of 1987, 6 pilots lost their lives on the North Atlantic. Still, for those pilots with a yearning for adventure and an unusual flying experience, the northern route to Europe offers special rewards.
If flight is made from a high-pressure area into a low-pressure area without adjusting the altimeter setting, the airplane's actual altitude would be 1. The same as the altimeter indicates, 2. Lower than indicated, or 3. Higher than indicated. The correct answer is number 2. The airplane's actual altitude would be lower than indicated by the altimeter.
I'd like to get a briefing. I'm going to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, if I could.
Yes, sir. And your aircraft identification?
3841 Quebec.
Your route of flight?
Riverside. Let's make it direct Jackson Hole if I can.
You sure can. What time of departure are you anticipating?
About an hour from now.
About an hour? Our weather depiction chart at this time is indicating a cold front from Montana down through central California moving southeast. High pressure dominating in back of that cold front. And currently we do have marginal VFR to IFR in the basin. Low ceilings and reduced visibilities.
Now, how can I make sure that that front is moving away?
Well, looking on our GOES imagery chart at the 8-mile range, the cold front is in this manner here, northeast to southwesterly manner, moving southeastwards. And checking on the 4-mile chart, the heaviest cloud coverage is located over southeastern Idaho at this time.
I see. Do you have radar coverage in that area to see the actual precipitation?
I sure do. In northwestern Utah is the only precipitation echo at this time. On a scale of 1 to 6, with 1 being the lightest, level 2 activity is being experienced in that area. It's a good thing you're not going to Florida. They're experiencing 3 to 4 level right now.
Mm-hmm. How about winds aloft? I'd like to stay low, maybe look at 6,000 feet first.
Well, at 6,000, the winds and temperatures aloft are out of southwest, moving to the northeast, and between 15 to 25 knots. If you decided to try 90,000 feet, you'll be experiencing a crosswind between 30 to 35 knots along your entire route. However, if you decided to go up to 12,000 feet,
oh, that looks good.
That would be much better for you. You'd be getting a tailwind between 25 to 35 knots along your entire route of flight.
That's a terrific way to see the difference, too, isn't it?
It sure is.
I got a return now, and I'd like to come back. I'm flexible here. I could come back this afternoon or even later than that.
On our 12-hour significant level prog chart, if you decided to depart this afternoon, marginal VFR IFR conditions are being experienced in northwestern Montana, moving southeastwards. Along with that, surface to 16,000 turbulence, moderate type turbulence, being experienced at this time. If you decided to wait just a little longer, the 24-hour level prog is indicating the marginal VFR IFR moving through the state to the east of the state, and also surface to 16,000 moderate turbulence still in that area.
I could go skiing, I guess. So can I look as far ahead as Friday even?
You sure can. The 36-hour prog chart is indicating snow type activity moving to the east, marginal VFR moving to the east, and high pressure dominating most of your route. The 48-hour prog is indicating high pressure along your entire route, and again the marginal VFR to the east, snow showers to the east.
Okay, I'd like to follow a flight plan if I could.
You sure can. That was
This is a rare occurrence. Less than 5% of all pilot briefings are made in person. That fact, coupled with modern technology, has given birth to the automated flight service station, the subject of my What's New segment for this video issue. Gone are the old teletype machines, pads of paper, and nails on the wall holding poorly produced facsimile maps and printed weather information. In place at 37 facilities around the country are Model 1 computer terminals, color graphic monitors with satellite-delivered pictures, and ICSS, an integrated communications switching system. By the end of 1990, 317 flight service stations, some dating back to 1920, would be consolidated into 61 automated stations like this one here in Riverside, California. When the conversion is complete, this automated flight service station will cover an area of 51,500 square miles, consolidating 6 older stations at Needles, Daggett, Blythe, Thermal, Lancaster, and Bakersfield, all in California. Are the controversial shutdowns worth it? Well, after visiting 2 of these new facilities, I'd say yes. It's apparent the great thought and effort went into designing a system to take us into the 21st century. In the older flight service stations, they used the LABS system, being phased out and replaced by Model 1 at these new automated facilities. With much older equipment, labs required entering each of the briefing elements manually. Briefers had to write down much of the pertinent information and then prompt the computer system for each segment of the complete weather briefing. Flight plans were written out on the FAA form and then given to another specialist to input and send to the destination. The destination station would manually check for overdue airplane.
Riverside Flight Service, may I help you?
Good morning. Yes, I'd like to get a weather briefing, please.
Okay, sir. Aircraft identification, please.
6515 Yankee.
Are you going VFR or IFR today, sir?
VFR.
Aircraft type?
A Cessna 210/Romeo.
Okay, sir. Where are you departing from?
Riverside.
At what time?
2100 Zulu.
Your altitude en route?
11,500.
And your route of flight and destination?
RNAV direct, and the destination is Phoenix Sky Harbor.
All right, just a moment, please. Okay, sir, along your route of flight today, we do have a flight precaution for occasional moderate turbulence below 18,000 feet. That's due to strong low. Okay, got your flight plan, and thank you for your destination address and phone number. That really makes it helpful in search and rescue.
And if you're inbound to Riverside, gone are the pieces of paper on a clipboard with your flight plan. The Model 1 keeps track of all pending VFR arrivals and flashes a warning when the plane is more than 30 minutes overdue. In-flight weather information is important to us all, and this position at an automated flight service station can answer your specific request with the aid of the Model 1 computer.
Riverside Flight Service, Centurion 6515 Yankee over Manning Pass, 122.2, over.
6515 Yankee, Riverside Radio, over.
15 Yankee is en route VFR at 11,500 to Phoenix. I'd like to get current weather at Phoenix, over.
6515 Yankee. Phoenix reporting 5,000, thin scattered, visibility 45, temperature 80, wind 150 at 6. Stand by, we'll look for some pilot reports. 6515 Yankee. I show a Bonanza over Palm Springs reporting light to occasional moderate turbulence at 2000. Over.
15 Yankee, roger. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
When all 6 flight service stations are consolidated into this facility, the in-flight specialist will monitor 39 frequencies, including 15 VORs. Now, here are 2 tips to make these airborne contacts easier.
Following the Dow Monte, sky is partially obscured, 200 fins.
Give the specialist time to answer. He or she may be on one of the other frequencies, giving another pilot information, and will answer you as soon as he's finished.
1,000 scattered in 7.
Riverside Radio, Cessna 90316 X-ray, listening to VOR.
Always identify the frequency you are using on your initial call, or the VOR you are monitoring. Oftentimes, when your aircraft is high enough, the radio call will light up on 2 or 3 nearby VORs, and the briefer has no way to know which one you're listening to. This is the machine we all love to hate, that puts our calls on hold while waiting for a briefer. But in reality, it's much more than that. As part of the Integrated Communications Switching System, or ICSS, at the new automated stations. With a touch-tone phone, you can easily access digitally recorded route briefings, advert information, and even file IFR flight plans through FastFile. This general background information, often enough for a go, no-go decision, allows you to bypass the specialist completely. With the new system, specialists will be able to go from an average of 14,000 services a year to over 20,000, an almost 50% increase. This means waiting time has been reduced, even though more calls come into one large facility.
Well, at Riverside, we keep track of the abandoned calls or hung-up calls before the pilot weather briefer can get to them. And it's remained 3 or 4%, even though we've added 3 additional flight service stations.
It's important to remember that in the consolidation program, all the transmitters and receivers remain, and some are even upgraded. All DF equipment is remoted, so no service is lost, and the telephone system allows toll-free access from remote locations. So what are pilots losing in this consolidation effort? Well, certainly not weather reporting from the closed locations, since it's being contracted to private companies. Now, as a typical example, the recent Daggett station operated only 8 hours a day, and after being closed, the replacement contract weather service reports 24 hours a day. And also remember that the in-flight radio calls are now answered full-time. Yes, some facilities that used to man the optional airport advisory service will be gone. In reality, however, they depended on pilots to report their position. Therefore, the similar advisories can be obtained with good, uncontrolled airport radio procedures by all of us. The automated flight service station has been designed to serve those of us with personal computers. When they reach full capacity, pilots may obtain briefings through home computers and soon file flight plans. Now, I usually end these What's New features with the cost of the product or service. In this case, the Flight Service Modernization Program will save almost $1 billion through 1995. Now, this is a big savings to the general aviation pilot, who usually absorbs a good share of these services through user taxes. Now, computers won't ever replace trained specialists in the flight service station system, but it looks like they sure will make their work and ours a whole lot more efficient.
The landing speed, in terms of true airspeed for a particular weight and configuration of the aircraft, will 1. Increase as relative humidity is decreased, 2. Increase as altitude is increased, or 3. Decrease as atmospheric pressure is decreased. correct answer is number 2. The true airspeed of the aircraft landing will increase as altitude is increased.
There's no doubt about it, night can be a magnificent time to fly. Lights go out. If that happens, you need to get the lights back on, fast. Flashlights may be a mere convenience in your automobile or your home, but in an airplane, they can be true lifesavers. In delivering airplanes to Europe and Africa in the normal pursuit of business here in the States, I fly quite a bit at night, and accordingly, I carry a flashlight or two, or more accurately, 4 of them. While it might be argued that's carrying light redundancy to an extreme, I have good reasons for packing 4 flashlights. First, you'll notice they're all fairly compact, so they don't take up much space in my flight bag. Second, they use 3 different size batteries. AAA's in this Brinkman, AA's in the Technolite, standard C-size batteries in the old reliable Everready. So even if I forget my spares, I can always find replacements for at least 1 flashlight on the road. Finally, I have a Cadnica NiCad flashlight, which can be recharged with regular house current, but which is only good for about an hour. I also carry a photographer's clamp with me, so that should I need to use a flashlight in the cockpit, I won't necessarily have to hold it.
Let's assume you're flying along at night, everything's running smoothly, and suddenly you have a total electrical failure. You're going to want to put some light on the subject as quickly as possible, and I suggest you try this Brinkman. With its adjustable wide beam, it works almost perfectly for emergency panel lighting. If you'd like to check for icing on the leading edge of the wings, you might try this Everready double C-cell. It's a concentrated beam, which is almost perfect for that purpose.
Night is a magnificent time to fly, possessed of a beauty all its own. Just remember that total, unexpected darkness in the cockpit can do a lot more than ruin your evening.
When confronted with unexpected difficulties during a takeoff or a landing, a pilot has only a few precious seconds, or possibly less, to select an alternate course of action and then to execute it. Multi-engine pilots drill in practicing rejected takeoffs, and every takeoff has a plan of action to cope with the possibility of an engine failure. Instrument pilots practice missed approaches by the dozen as a part of their training, and every approach begins with thinking about the possibility of having to make a missed approach. But seldom do pilots flying in single-engine airplanes in VFR conditions have the same mental preparedness or plan of action. And unfortunately, FAA statistics show clearly that many accidents have been caused by pilots who were unable to properly execute a rejected takeoff or a rejected landing. So in this feature, I'd like to review the right way to execute each of these 2 critically important maneuvers and give you some tips for improving your proficiency. Let's look first at rejected takeoffs. Complacency is a prime cause of departure accidents. The takeoff seems to be such a simple procedure that pilots anticipate little or no difficulty with it. And it's this complacent mindset that is so dangerous. Studies have shown that pilots do not take immediate action when they encounter a problem because they are unprepared to abort the takeoff. When you apply power, you probably anticipate that you're going to make a normal takeoff and a normal departure. But you should be equally prepared to abort the takeoff should it become necessary. Come on, let's fire up the engine and see how a typically complacent pilot might handle an aborted takeoff.
Electric fuel pump is on, mixture is rich, propeller is set, gear selector in the down position, the flaps are set properly. There we go. This engine doesn't sound quite right. Oh, it'll be all right. Come on, airspeed, let's go. Come on, airspeed. Hey, there's something wrong here.
First mistake. By not being mentally prepared, the decision-making process is too long, eating up precious runway, 84 feet per second at 50 knots.
Easy on the throttle. I don't want to hurt this engine.
Second mistake. Maximum performance requires immediate and total power reduction.
Easy does it. Easy on the brakes. Hey, wait a minute. These brakes aren't working too well. I hope we can stop this thing in time.
Third and possibly final mistake. Poor braking technique and failure to get the weight of the airplane on the main wheels.
There we go. Wow. That was close.
That rather sloppy rejected takeoff took 2,800 feet. The problem is, this represents the actual performance of a typically complacent pilot. Now let's find out how much better we can do with more efficient techniques.
Preparation for an aborted takeoff begins before you taxi onto the runway. It requires that you adopt the proper mental set. And you should review the items that might cause you to have to make an abort. For example, engine roughness, any unusual noise or smell, a strange vibration, something you're not accustomed to. Or perhaps you might not have the normal amount of acceleration, or you might be having difficulty with directional control. These or anything else that might go wrong during a takeoff warrants an immediate abort. The idea, however, is to remain alert, be ready for that abort at all times, and take action while there's still time to do so safely. Kernville Unicom, this is Warbird 28416, taxiing on runway 17 for departure. And since the proficient pilot is always anticipating the possibility of an aborted takeoff, it makes sense to use all of the runway. Like the old saying goes, the runway behind you does no good whatsoever. As we line up on the runway and add power, we think about the possibility of an aborted takeoff. We're ready for an abort should it be necessary. There's a vibration I don't like. Throttle closed.
The first step involves retarding the throttle, right now, without hesitation. Any delay in throttle retardation eats up valuable runway that you might not be able to afford.
Simultaneously apply maximum braking.
Many pilots wait until the throttle is closed before applying the brakes, but this delay consumes excessive runway distance. Instead, retard the throttle and apply the brakes simultaneously.
Retract the flaps.
The third step involves retracting the flaps. This has the effect of reducing the amount of lift being generated by the wing, which places more aircraft weight directly on the main wheels. And this, of course, increases braking effectiveness. One must be very careful, however, not to raise the landing gear instead of the flaps. Otherwise, you might come to a very sudden stop.
Back pressure on the control yoke.
While closing the throttle, applying brake pressure, and raising the flaps, you should hold the control wheel just about full aft. This has three benefits. First of all, it takes some of the weight off the nose wheel and transfers them to the main tires, increasing braking effectiveness. Secondly, it has the effect of reducing the possibility of wheel barrowing or loss of directional control. And thirdly, pulling back on the control wheel increases the download on the tail, which has the effect of adding even more weight to the main landing gear wheels, increasing braking effectiveness again.
There we go. Lots of runway left. Well, that was a lot better. We used less than 2,000 feet, and that's more than 800 feet less than was used during the previous aborted takeoff. And that 800 feet of difference can be the difference between an accident and an incident. And the difference is attributable to pilot and being mentally prepared.
Incidentally, to see if a runway is long enough to allow you to accelerate to rotation speed and then to abort the takeoff, simply add the normal takeoff distance of your airplane to the anticipated landing distance. The abort itself can usually be performed in less than the landing distance. For example, in this Piper Arrow, I would anticipate a takeoff roll at this weight, density, altitude, and wind of about 1,800 feet. A landing under these same conditions should require 680 feet. In other words, the distance required to accelerate to rotation speed and then abort the takeoff, in this case, is 2,480 feet. Multi-engine pilots refer to this as a balanced field length, and it's a nice safety factor to have, even when flying single-engine aircraft. The takeoff is one phase of flight that gives a pilot all the time he needs to plan and prepare. To abort or not to abort is one question you should be able to answer during every point of your takeoff roll. Now let's talk about rejected landings. Interestingly enough, FAA reports show innumerable accidents that occurred because a pilot was unprepared to abandon an unsatisfactory approach while there was still enough time, speed, and altitude for him to do so. And the more experience a pilot has, the more likely he is to be a victim of what is called landing expectancy. He expects to land every time. Years of successful landings reinforce that belief. The solution? First of all, complete the before landing checklist early in the game. This includes selecting the fullest tank, properly adjusting the mixture, lowering the landing gear, turning on the auxiliary fuel pump, and setting the propeller to maximum RPM. The last item on the checklist is to get your attitude adjusted. Be prepared to pull up and go around if anything seems to be wrong. Numerous accidents occur every year because the pilot took the correct action, but after it was too late to do so safely. If any unsatisfactory condition develops that could adversely affect the approach or the landing, make the decision to pull up immediately and reject the landing.
Looks like we've got the landing made. Wait a minute. Is that somebody taxiing onto the runway at the other end? Oh, no, he's taking off this way. Okay, time for a missed approach. Rotate the nose. Maximum allowable power.
The most common error during a go-around is a pilot's failure to apply maximum allowable power. Since an airplane on an approach is in a high-drag, low-speed configuration, it may continue to settle at an alarming rate unless the go-around is executed properly and without hesitation. Remember, a pull-up is a maximum performance maneuver.
Flaps to the correct position. Positive rate of climb. Landing gear up. Safe altitude, safe airspeed. Flaps all the way up. Of course, you want to keep an eye out for traffic. And be sure you advise the control tower, if there is one, just what you're doing. No one likes surprises.
Obtaining the necessary go-around performance at high-density altitudes can be extremely difficult. In fact, did you know that every airplane has a critical density altitude above which a positive climb rate cannot be established in the landing configuration? Unfortunately, this information is not published in the pilot's operating handbook. You might find it interesting to determine your airplane's go-around performance at altitude before you really need it. Here's how.
Okay, we're presently at 9,000 feet. I'm going to establish the aircraft in a normal approach profile. Bring the power back, slow to approach speed. Start dropping the flaps. Landing gear down. And we'll establish the airplane in a normal approach configuration. All flaps, gear down, approximately 75 knots, and approximately 500 feet per minute. Okay, the approach is fairly well stabilized, and I'm going to attempt a missed approach without retracting the gear, without retracting the flaps. Here we go. We're not going to get a lot of power, of course. That's it, about 22 inches. And the airplane won't climb. There's a 0 rate of climb and the airspeed is bleeding off. Nope, the only way to make a missed approach would be to raise the landing gear. Step 1. Retract some flaps. Now you'll notice the airplane will slowly begin to climb. A missed approach at high density altitudes is not something you want to have to rely on.
Experienced mountain pilots often execute a similar performance test before committing to a landing at high density altitude. Now here's what they do. While on the downwind leg of the pattern, with the aircraft in the landing configuration and at normal approach speed, apply full power and attempt to climb. Now this will give you an idea of just how much reserve power and performance really is available. Now this would also be a nifty time to adjust the mixture for maximum power. In this way, if a pull-up does become necessary, the engine will be able to give you all it's got. If the simulated pull-up at pattern altitude is marginal or impossible, consider approaching with less than full flaps. Don't lower the flaps all the way until the field is made and you're prepared to commit to a landing. A pull-up is much safer with partial flaps than with the flaps all the way down, and the difference in stall speed protection is hardly worth mentioning. Properly rejecting an unsatisfactory takeoff or landing can save your life. Be prepared to abort every takeoff, to reject every landing. Make the decision as early as possible and execute that decision with maximum performance. Be certain that you control the airplane. Don't let it control you.
If the angle of bank were held constant and airspeed varied, the load factor would 1. Vary depending on the rate of turn, 2. Vary with speed increase or decrease, or 3. Remain constant. The correct answer is number 3. The load factor remains constant even when airspeed is varied.
Probably no piece of equipment on any airplane deserves more respect than the propeller. Propellers are unpredictable creatures that could snap at you with the slightest provocation. Let's examine some common cautions that you should consider concerning propellers. When the propeller is rotated, the magneto is engaged, generating electricity to ignite the air-fuel mixture in the cylinders. Now, under normal conditions, the slow rotation of the magneto by the starter isn't enough of a spin to generate much electricity. This is why one or both magnetos on airplanes have what is called an impulse coupling. The purpose of the impulse coupling is to save up a little spin on a spring, thus allowing the magneto to spin quickly at intervals, generating lots of spark. Now, with the prop resting in just the right position and with just the slightest touch, we'll hear a noticeable click as the impulse coupling is activated and the magneto spun. Now, if the mags are on or they're not properly grounded, any unburnt fuel in the cylinders could ignite, sending the prop spinning unexpectedly, and this is very dangerous. If inspecting the engine cowling requires turning the propeller, then turn the propeller in the opposite direction of normal rotation. This prevents the impulse coupling from being activated and the possibility of a hot mag firing. Pilots often assume that if they turn the ignition key to off, then the mag is no longer hot and can't fire. Well, this is accurate, assuming that the P lead or ground lead is actually grounding the magneto. We don't know that for sure unless we occasionally do a mag grounding check. Let's see how it's done. Prior to shutdown, with the engine operating at its lowest possible RPM, quickly turn the mag switch off and then immediately back on. We should hear the engine start to quit because of ignition loss as both mags become grounded. Now, if the engine continues to run with the mag switch in the off position, then one or both of the mags are not grounding properly. If this is the case, a mechanic should be consulted. A common misconception is that with the master switch off, the magnetos become ineffective. Nothing can be farther from the truth. In fact, the magnetos are independent from the aircraft's electrical system in much the same way that a lawnmower can run without a battery. As I shut the master switch off, we can see that the engine is still running, indicating that with the master switch off, there's absolutely no protection from a hot mag. So it's a very good practice to occasionally perform a mag grounding check to make sure that the mags do indeed ground. Also, never leave the keys in the ignition after shutdown, and never under any circumstance assume that because the master switch is off, that the mags can't fire. They certainly can.
The Corsair is the last piston engine fighter produced by the United States. It went into production in 1942 and continued in production for a decade. The F4U 1A seen here is regarded as the most aesthetically pleasing of the bent wing series. Powered by a 2,000 horsepower 18-cylinder radial engine, the F4U is capable of a top speed of about 420 miles an hour at 20,000 feet. Normal cruise is about 180 miles an hour with an untanked range of 1,000 miles. Maximum rate of climb is almost 3,000 feet per minute, and the surface ceiling is over 36,000 feet. With 6 50 caliber machine guns, extensive armor, and excellent aerobatic capability, the Corsair was a formidable aerial weapon. It was also an excellent dive bomber, with the doors on the main gear designed to serve as dive brakes. Note that the tail wheel is retracted in the dive configuration. The accuracy of the Corsair as a dive bomber was only about 7% less than that of the Douglas Douglas, which was specifically designed for the role. Early Corsairs suffered from a dangerous bouncing problem in carrier landings, and several pilots were killed in accidents. The problem was tamed by modifying the landing gear strut to give a longer, softer stroke, but not before the Navy planners had made up their minds that the Corsair should be land-based. In 1943, the first combat Corsair squadrons were deployed in the South Pacific Islands. American pilots were no longer limited to the tactics of the slower early fighters. The Corsair gave them the opportunity to engage Japanese Zeros with confidence.
First time I saw the Corsair was overseas, and it was at Guadalcanal in Solomons. And of course, I loved it because I knew it was going to replace our old Grumman Wildcats. And it had a superior way to climb to the famous Zero, which the old Wildcats really didn't. And it was much faster than the Zero. And of course, we always did have a little more firepower than they did. So that gave us pretty much 3 good eggs in the basket. Of course, you never could turn with them because they were such a light plane. I think without a doubt it saved my life because I got cornered a few times there and was able to, with the excess speed and whatnot, to maneuver my way out of combined trouble.
In 1944, Corsairs finally got their chance at shipboard service to provide additional protection against the kamikaze threat. They proved themselves to be the best carrier-based fighters of the world. And at war's end, the final tally, over 2,100 Japanese aircraft shot down in flight for a loss in combat of only 190 F4Us, better than an 11-to-1 kill ratio. The Corsair remained in production through the early jet age and saw extensive service in the Korean War, where it was adapted to a wide variety of missions, from dive bombing to night reconnaissance. It could carry the load, but would get the job done. Today, preparation for the Corsairs are ready, and the plans of families are in China, California, as entirely best. The famous F4U is captain, and the fastest Corsair in the world, the Super Corsair, flown by January 11. Our opponent, Corky Fornoff, is also a Corsair pilot, but danger was first up.
This is the F4U Corsair, the first fighter the United States had that would exceed 400 miles an hour in level flight. The airplane had many unique names. Some people call it the U-Bird because of the gull wing effect. Most of the pilots call it the hose nose because when they sat in the cockpit and looked down the long nose, it looked like a piece of long hose. The Japanese call it whistling death because of a unique whistle it had as it flies through the air. In later years, it became known as a hog and was used all the way up through the Korean War. Some of the unique things about the airplane are the fact that there is spot welding in several parts of the fuselage, something that was very new at that time. The rudder is offset for torque. The main portion of the rudder, the movable portion, is fabric covered, as we can see there. So we come around to the elevator. There we see the elevator is fabric covered also. We have a unique feature here in that we have the pilot control trim tab here and a servo tab, which makes the forces lighter to higher speeds. Come down below. Down here we have the trademark of all carrier-based airplanes, the tailhook. Tailhook, however, on the Corsair posed a problem. It was a very difficult airplane to land on a carrier, and it took skilled pilots. During the Second World War, when we had so many pilots coming out very rapidly, a lot of the younger pilots were losing the Corsairs on carrier landings. So the Navy made a wise decision. They had the Corsair become a land-based fighter for both the Marines and the Navy. As you come aboard a carrier, you need the high lift, high drag flaps. These you can see are very high lift, very high drag. As we can see here, these are down about 50 degrees. And when a pilot is landing on a carrier, he's always carrying power just in case he has to make a go-around. On the other hand, once he knows he has it made on that pitching little deck and wants to stop and he pulls the power off, he wants it to stop immediately. So these, as low as they are here, you can see create a great deal of drag. So we come out to the aileron. It's pretty unique in itself in that the whole aileron is made of plywood and is covered in fabric. It also has the servo tab, as we can see here, to lighten up the control forces at the higher speeds. I think something that's different that a lot of people don't realize is that when these airplanes were operational on carriers, they were pushed around the deck. They really didn't have the little machines to pull them around as we do today. So they had a retractable handhold right here. You could just push it in, just like the steps to climb aboard. And one of the sailors could hold it here while others pushed in various places to help move it around. It's pretty unique. As we come down the leading edge of the wing of the Corsair, we notice a stall strip. Corsair had a problem in that at stalling speeds, the ailerons would stall first, and therefore you would lose roll control. They put the stall strip on here to force the wing to stall faster so that you constantly had roll control. We come on down, the airplane carried 650 caliber machine guns. And when they were not in use, they normally would tape the ports here so that they didn't pressurize or get any water and rain and dirt and so forth back up into the guns and the ammunition. The tape was no problem. If they ever needed the guns, all they had to do was pull the trigger and blow the tape away. Here we have the lens for the gun camera, and it not just recorded everything that the guns were shooting at. As we come on down, the gear, it's pretty unique in that it actually retracts backwards, but once it gets about halfway through its swing, the wheel turns 90 degrees so that it lays flat in the wing. Over here we have the inlets. This is the oil cooler. Here is the inlet for the carburetor. And this is used to feed the air to the R2800 Pratt & Whitney engine. That's an 18-cylinder engine developing 2,000 horsepower. I'd like to bring in Steve Hinton, gentleman that flew this airplane in the series Baa Black Sheep. And let's find out from Steve. Steve, how do you like the F4U Corsair?
I love the Corsair. It's a great airplane. Great to fly, easy to fly, real good, nice smooth running engine and jet-like control feel.
I know, I have often compared it to the P-51 Mustang in terms of takeoff and landing and lack of visibility in landing. And I've told a lot of people that below 7,000 to 10,000 feet, if the Mustang and the Corsair were going out to fight, I'd rather have the Corsair.
I think you're right. It has an exceptional power-to-weight ratio. I can't speak for a military Corsair. I can speak for civilian eyes like this, where the plane is lightweight, below 9,000 pounds. and you have 2,000 horsepower engine, it really makes quite a difference when you're keeping your speed up in a turn and all.
Now I'll tell you, how about a cockpit checkout?
Okay, let's go. Okay, Corky, over here on the left, this is the tailwheel lock handle. And the tailwheel on this airplane locks just straight away as you line up on the runway. You lock it, and it just holds it into position. Okay, rudder trim. We use 6 degrees right rudder for takeoff, just to offset the engine torque. Elevator trim we set on neutral. That's that little mark right there. Aileron trim we put on 0 for takeoff. The book says right wing down for takeoff, but it actually works better with 0 aileron trim for takeoff on the Corsair. Okay, you have your fuel selector. You have 236 gallons of fuel in the main tank, and it's nothing more than an on or an off. Next to it over here is the emergency hand pump. In case you lose break a hydraulic line or you lose your fluid, you can still operate your flaps or landing gear with the emergency hand pump here and just operate it back and forth. Okay, throttle quadrant, standard Navy issue, the manifold pressure lever throttle right up here. Engine's to 52 inches, full throttle. 42 inches being max continuous power, and we like to climb it at 38 inches, and we like to cruise between 30 and 33 inches. Mixture control, use auto lean for cruise, auto rich for takeoff and climb. Idle cutoff all the way back. Over here is the supercharger handle. 2-stage, 2-speed supercharger in the engine, so we operate the engine in neutral unless we reach an altitude where we're operating at full throttle. We can't get the desired manifold pressure, then we reduce throttle and shift it into the next ratio gear to get the manifold pressure back up. Power panel is way down here, and 2,700 being max and 1,100 being minimum RPM on the quadrant. We like to operate the engine at 2,700 for takeoff, 2,300 to climb, and between 2,100 and 1,600 RPM for cruise operations. There's a vibration zone in the engine. The propeller engine combination gives you a pretty stiff vibration between 1,700 RPM and 2,000 RPM. It shakes enough where you think there's something wrong with the airplane, but as you're reducing power and you go through that range and you get back to 1,650 or 1,600, it's just smooth as glass down there. Okay, the wing flap panel located right here, flaps down, flaps up. And if you can see these little increments here, you could select 10 degrees flaps, 20 degrees flaps, 30 degrees flaps. Okay, mag switch over here. The standard mag switch, you have both left and right mags. Your landing gear position indicators, and they're direct cables that are hooked right to the gear, so you can tell the position of the landing gear going up and down. This is the gear handle, gear down and up. We don't want to put it up on the ground, obviously. Okay, as you can see, Corky, we've changed the instrumentation in the radios to make it a little more practical for general aviation use. Airspeed indicator, the way this airplane is configured, we're looking at about 68 knots in a dirty configuration to stall. Normal approach, we fly at about 90 knots. We cross the fence around 90 knots. Our landing gear extension speed is 200 knots. And the airplane normal cruise at about 210, 215 knots indicated at about a 70, 75 gallon hour cruise. Okay, over on the right side, Corky, we got the engine instruments. They're all laid out right here for a quick look at. Manifold pressure, RPM, cylinder head temperature, then your little instruments, oil pressure, oil temperature, and fuel pressure. It's a 2,000 horsepower, 2,800 engine, and takeoff power being 52 inches and 2,700 RPM. We're limited there for 5 minutes at 2,000 horsepower. Okay, this little subpanel down here, Corky's got some more instruments in it that are pretty important. We have our fuel gauge, hydraulic pressure gauge, system hydraulics, voltmeter, an amp meter, G forces on the airplane, and the airplane is built to stand 7 positive, 3 negative. A pretty stout machine, as you can see. And then a suction instrument here for gyro instruments. Okay, over here are engine cooling controls. A big lever here is a cowl flap handle, and this opens and closes the cowl flaps that you see in the back of the engine cowl, and it regulates the amount of air going through the cowling for cooling the engine. Okay, the next handle over is the oil cooler flap, and these are little doors that are located right behind the oil coolers, and they regulate the amount of air that goes in and out of the oil cooler. And the next one over is the intercooler flap, and what that is a flap on the bottom of the accessory section that allows air to flow through the intercoolers, which is the supercharger air cooling. Control stick, rubber pedals with brakes on them, and the brakes on Corsair are very good. This particular version of the Corsair has a rather funny geometry in the rudder pedals, which you'll probably feel when you're pushing the pedals around. The brake changes height all the time, so takes a little getting used to. But after a few flights in the plane, you get pretty confident in it, and it really handles great. Okay, as you can see, Corky, that's it.
Let's go flying. I'm ready.
Let's go.
I use 52 inches and 27 RPM. Really, you just load it up, lock the tail up, and launch. Of course, it accelerates very quickly and breaks ground in usually less than 1,000 feet with our typical light load. Is 38 inches and 2,300 RPM. Good calls for 135 knots for best rate of climb. I like to run at least 150. It's pretty cool, and you can see our cockpit better. It still gives a couple thousand feet a minute with climb. I usually run about 32 inches and 2,050 RPM. It gives me about 210 knots indicated, and it's about 75 to 80 gallons of fuel an hour. Right back to 30 inches and 1,600 RPM, still indicates about 185 knots. The fuel cycle's down to about 60 gallons. Not bad thing that you're very The rear ends are very light. 180 to 220 knots is about the right speed for a wheel. We're going to at least 200 knots for a loop with clean power, and 250 knots works good for elements and cumulates. Approach and landing is easy, once you're out. I use 80 knots on track 4 with 4 flaps. The landing gear on now is a very long stroke and it's real soft. Sometimes in a real landing you can't even tell when the wheels touch. Air control can be a little tricky. It takes big rudder movements for directional control. P-51 pilots and Hellcat pilots have a pretty big surprise in this area. I can understand why the Navy had a problem with this bird when it was first introduced. It takes longer to learn than some of the other Warbirds, but it's still a great airplane.
The fastest Corsair in the world is this Reno Racer, built by fellow rebuilders in Chino, California. This much modified airplane won first place in 1985 with a speed on the closed course of 438 miles per hour. This Super Corsair belongs to fighter rebuilders and is today flown by John Malone.
Well, Corky, particularly with this Corsair, we started off with a bigger engine, which is mainly the biggest modification we did to the airplane, and for horsepower reasons and for speed, we put a 4360 engine in it, capable of 4,000 horsepower on the power plant side of that, and then on the airframe side of that, we put clipped the wings approximately 4 feet aside, and which gives us a smaller funnel area. And tucking the engine in, we put a B-26 cowling on there for a really tight, very tight, small funnel area. We lightened it up quite a bit, and we put a Aero Products propeller off a Skyrator on it with a nose case off a C97, so we can get the right speed for the propeller at a time. The RPM we're running on the engine.
At Reno 87, the Super Corsair finished fourth in the gold race. Fast, reliable, and a real crowd pleaser. The Corsairs live on, loved and admired. These are wonderful airplanes, an important part of our heritage, as are the men who flew them.
Oh, it was after a regular dogfight, and I saw a guy down below me quite low, Japanese Zero, and so I thought I'd scoot down and surprise him. And I was a guy that got surprised. Got 4 of them there that had me boxed in, and only a tiny little cloud that I tried to duck in at 3,000 feet. Every time I'd come out one side, another one would corner me and nail me. And I got so thirsty doing this that I took off my canteen and started drinking water through all these motions. And then finally, people are yelling, "Where's the fight? Where's the fight?" I said, "Jiminy Christmas, come down over the Faroe Islands. I got 4 of them cornered here."
I personally hope you've enjoyed this 4th video issue of ABC's Wide World of Flying. You know, this concludes our first full year of programs, and as we look forward to our 2nd year, we'd like to thank you for your enthusiastic support. As video magazines become a wave of the future, your issues of Wide World of Flying just may become collector's items. All of you who have subscribed in this first year have been identified on our records as charter subscribers. Now, you'll always enjoy the lowest subscription price available, which also leads me to this reminder. Attached to this tape is your renewal order. Please return it right away to assure the uninterrupted enjoyment of your subscription. And note also that we're accepting 2-year subscriptions, which assure you a locked-in rate to protect you against future price increases. And as an added bonus, your subscription also includes our brand new newsletter, which you'll receive 4 times a year in between video issues. Looking ahead to our next edition, you'll go behind the scenes in Hollywood to see one of the most exciting flying jobs around, flying camera ship for film and television production. You'll learn about the different camera mount systems, helicopters used, and you'll go along on a typical production set. Now, many of you have expressed interest in a story about getting an instrument rating. So our cameras will take you along with David Jackson as he sweats his way through the accelerated 10-day course from PIC. You'll get a real insider look at what's involved in getting this rating, and you'll even ride along with Dave as he takes his check ride. Plus, you'll see another airplane checkout with Bill Cox, more AOPA safety features from Rod Machado, more What's New, and another lesson in flying proficiency from Barry Schiff. Right now, though, stay tuned for our bonus buyer's guide and a chance to see exciting aviation products and services.
The Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association is at work serving its members every day. One area of great concern to some members is the renewal of their medical certificates.
That's right. State in the letter that the examination they're requesting is an invasive procedure. It is not indicated from your doctor's perspective, and that you're requesting reconsideration of this request by the Federal Air Surgeon's Office in Washington, D.C. All right, then when the file arrives in Washington, I'll take a look at it, find out what in the world it is they're looking for.
Here, the representation of AOPA is one-on-one to assure fair and reasonable consideration of the facts in each individual case.
Here at AOPA, at the Medical Certification Branch of AOPA, we try to represent the members' perspective at the Federal Air Surgeon's Office, or if necessary in Oklahoma City, to determine whether or not they have been rightly or wrongly denied a medical certificate. We will review their files as thoroughly as possible from a medical perspective, and if necessary, represent them in Oklahoma City or Washington, D.C.
The assistance and follow-through of the Medical Certification Branch is just another example of the many benefits enjoyed by members. If you would like to join the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association and receive all the benefits of being a member, including Pilot Magazine every month, simply call their toll-free number, 1-800-USA-AOPA. They will be pleased to answer any questions you may have and will take your membership information right over the phone. Looking ahead, mark your calendar right now for October 6th, 7th, and 8th. Nashville, Tennessee will be the site of the next AOPA annual convention based at the Opryland Hotel. Well-known hospitality and great country music should make for a most enjoyable aviation experience. For more information or to register right now to assure good room selection, call this same toll-free number, 1-800-USA-AOPA.
FAA.
Hello, fellow pilots. I'm John King of King Schools. You know, things are changing fast these days regarding airspace. In fact, so fast, it's hard to keep up. You'll want to know about these most recent changes we've included in our courses. First of all, having even the most current edition of a sectional chart won't be enough anymore if you're flying to an airport also depicted on a terminal area chart. The area covered by this TCA chart is shown inside this blue band. Now, the reason is, in order to clarify the depiction of the TCA, the FAA has removed the airport information from the sectional chart for all airports also shown on the VFR terminal area chart. This means if you want to know elevation, runway lighting, runway length, or communications frequencies for these airports, you'll also have to carry the appropriate TCA chart. Here's another change. If you plan on flying in a Group 2 TCA, you need to know that since December 1st of 1987, altitude encoding equipment, or Mode C, is required in Group 2 TCAs as well as Group 1 TCAs. Finally, they've changed the way ARSs are shown on the sectional chart. Now, previously, ARSs were shown by blue slash marks. The color blue is usually used to indicate that communications are required. Well, apparently, some pilots were confusing ARSs and TCAs, so ARSs are now shown by magenta slash marks instead. All of these changes mean that pilots now have to work harder than ever before to stay up to date.
I'm Martha King. Here are 3 recent regulation changes regarding your aircraft that you need to be aware of. First, as of March 7th, 1988, all aircraft now must display an external identification plate or decal located either near the rearmost entrance door or on the fuselage near the tail surface. The information required is aircraft make, model, and serial number. Now, if your aircraft doesn't have one provided by the manufacturer, and many aircraft don't, it's your responsibility to make or buy an ID plate or decal and to fix it to your aircraft. There are no size requirements, but it should be legible and not come off easily. Second, small registration numbers may go better with your attractive paint scheme, but they're no longer adequate if you fly across the borders of the USA. If you cross an ADIZ or DEWIZ, which you will if you leave the country, the aircraft must have 12-inch high registration marks. You can use temporary marks so long as they won't come off during flight. And finally, if your aircraft has been modified by adding extended range fuel tanks in the passenger cabin or baggage compartment, you must carry aboard the aircraft a copy of the FAA Form 337 showing approval of that modification. This form must be made available at the request of any FAA inspector or law enforcement officer. And remember, even if you're just renting or borrowing an aircraft, as the pilot in command, you are responsible for ensuring that the aircraft you're flying meets these new regulations.
Whether you want to get up to date for a biennial flight review, pass a written test, or prepare for a check ride, it's all guaranteed. King Video Ground School trains you to understand the big picture by taking you on location in the cockpit, in the weather, or in the tower. Monster graphics make difficult problems fall into place with ease. Private Pilot magazine says the student who follows John King's lecture, graphics, and numerous sample problems will have an excellent understanding of the subject. Plane and Pilot News says our evaluation panel found the King Accelerated Ground School tapes, in our opinion, to be the best offered. Here's what students say.
This is Patty Wagstaff and her Pitts F1 Special.
I've taken 2 King Ground School courses. My sister's taken a couple, and my husband's taken probably 3 or 4. And every one of them has been really successful and really fantastic. And we've all done great on them, too. We've gotten really high scores. And can attribute it all to John and Martha, to King Accelerated Ground Schools.
Hi, my name is Rick Gillette. I used the King video course to obtain a 96 on my instrument instructor written exam. Couldn't have done it without King.
I took the King Private Ground School course. I thought it was a very concise and thorough course, and it gave me everything I needed to pass the FAA written with a score of 88.
It raised my level of competency quite a bit. I did get a 92 on my private test, and I got a 98 on my IFR test, and I feel really, really proud.
And I find that they're very easy to follow, and being able to rewind them and review makes it even more easy.
The newest King course, 101 Ways to be a Better, Safer Pilot, is a course every pilot will benefit from. You'll learn rules of thumb, how to predict local weather conditions, how to avoid being deceived by optical illusions in flight, how to avoid mechanical problems in flight, how to communicate on the radio with ease, and much, much more. The special introductory price is just $99 for 4 hours of practical learning. King VFR and IFR Updater courses are a great way to prepare for a biennial flight review or just get current again. Each is $99 for 4 hours of informative video. King written exam courses include at least 5 2-hour videotapes, a course book, 3 practice exams with answers and detailed explanations, plus your exam sign-off. Exam courses for only $199 are Instrument, Commercial, Flight Instructor, Instrument Instructor, ATP, and Flight Engineer. The private course is only $149. King flight test courses show you how to ace your private, commercial, or IFR flight test. An actual FAA examiner tells what he expects of you, and your instructor shows you how to demonstrate your knowledge on the ground and in the air. Each course includes the Practical Test Standards booklet and 2 videotapes for only $89. For same-day shipping, call 800-854-1001. You'll have a 20-day free trial, and if you fail your test, you keep the course and get your money back. Order within 30 days and mention ABC's Wide World of Flying, and we'll give you a bonus for promptness. The King Takeoff Course Album, a $60 value. Your bonus includes audio cassettes on mountain flying, weather flying, flying the high-flying recips, and frightened spouses. To get your bonus for promptness and your King course, call 800-854-1001 now.
Man was outborn with an internal navigation system. Has he always followed geese, the sun, and the stars, and made stick marks in the sand? Maps are as old as thought, and thought is as old as man. From the beginning, he has recorded his discoveries and exploits and charted his legends with geographical surrounds. He developed a system of navigation, not so much to know where he was going, but rather to remember where he had been. For how else could he return to the treasures and pleasures he had found? One of the most accurate navigational devices to be developed was the Horizon system. A fisherman could drop a lobster pot 15 miles offshore. By simply noting the latitude and longitude, he could return to that very same spot and get his catch. Today's Horizon enables you to fly to your destination without the restrictions imposed by inflexible VOR airway structures. You now have the ability to know at any time where you are, relative to your destination or to any airport, VOR, NDB, or intersection. Digital Marine Electronics Corporation, our parent company, made its reputation in the marine Moran trade. We have been improving Morans for over 17 years. For the past 9 years, the National Marine Electronics Association has offered a coveted award for performance and reliability. We have won it all 9 times. Now, with our experience and expertise, we have developed the North Star Navigation Management System. Far more than just a Loran, this black box outthinks, outperforms, and outmaneuvers its competition. North Star Avionics. The North Star has superior range, the largest database, the brightest display, and most important of all, it is the only Loran that has independent readouts. It's really easy to operate and speaks a language you understand. The North Star's receiver is recognized as the most powerful and accurate.
For capacity, our database contains over 20,000 locations. Not only airports, but all VORs, NDBs, and low-level intersections. Over twice as many locations as any other LORAN ever built. And the North Star doesn't limit you to the United States. It knows its way around Canada, Mexico, and the Bahamas. Wherever you're flying, simply dial up the airport name. If you can't remember it, the city name will do just as well. The North Star will not only navigate you there, it also knows the airport's elevation, its runway lengths, direction, and surfaces of up to 5 runways, its latitude, longitude, ATIS, approach, tower, ground, and even Unicom frequencies. No other LORAN made today knows all this. The North Star's database is a comprehensive encyclopedia of aviation navigation information. Of course, we're fully updatable. Our LORAN is unique. You can watch your distance and location on one side while working its numerous capabilities on the other, simultaneously. We at North Star have always felt that a LORAN navigational device was not enough for aero navigation. Our LORAN was designed by pilots, for pilots. A LORAN system that can answer your questions as fast as you can think them, while still functioning as a basic LORAN. The North Star Navigator is equipped with a data output, which allows interfacing the set with visual display systems, fuel computers, and ELTs. The North Star outperforms its competition in receiver sensitivity and is unique in its ability to operate effectively through the mid-continent gap. And yes, you can take the North Star home to program destination coordinates or just to play with it. Our quality control even surprised us, but was no accident. Our 36-month warranty is longer than any other LORAN in its price range. This is the aging room. Here, our navigator spends the first 5 days of its functional life running continuously under varying temperatures and tests. For places lost, for places found, the North Star, it remembers. North Star, a multi-purpose computer-controlled aero navigational device, allows you to do what you like doing best, fly.
North Star now features the Aeronaut TCA and ARSA warning system, a serial data put to interface with external devices, and StarGuard security to prevent unauthorized use. For the name of your local dealer, call 1-800-NAVIGATOR. That's 1-800-NAVIGATOR. Barry Schiff's newest book, The Proficient Pilot 2, is now available. It includes 39 chapters of unique insight on subtopics as coping with wind shear, engine fires, and IFR shortcuts. Wide World of Flying viewers may order an autographed copy of this important book by sending a check for $21.95 to Aero Progress, P.O. Box 66-1039, Los Angeles, California 90066. Shipping and handling is included. This autographed copy offer is made exclusively to viewers of Wide World of Flying. ABC Olympic tradition continues. Now you can own the official 1988 Calgary Winter Olympics video. Excitement. Rejoice with the best. The 1988 official Calgary Winter Olympics video. $24.98 plus $3 postage and handling. For your video cassette, call 1-800-ABC-VCR. If you are viewing a borrowed copy of Wide World of Flying and would enjoy having your own subscription, or would like to order a subscription as a very special gift for a pilot or aviation enthusiast, credit card holders may call us toll-free at 1-800-999-8783. Or you may send a personal check to our subscription center in Riverton, New Jersey. The price is just $99.95 for 1 full year.